Saddle up your horses.
Pitter patter, let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast, and Deadpool and Wolverine is not the biggest team up of the summer. No, it is actually Mario Vetanze and Cameron Parker doing a team up for Manely Broncos. You know why? Because it's literally been 2 years, I would say, for us to kind of get the schedules figured out and get Mario
last summer together, Cameron.
Well, you sure?
I'm absolutely positive. Yeah, last summer. It's okay though. It's okay that you hold me in such high regard that you completely forget about shows that we've done together in the past. But it's fine, Cameron, because we're doing it now, and that's the important thing. And you eat cake is what I've heard. You're just you're out of bread, so I say let Cam eat cake.
I mean that is actually fitting why I'm literally wearing the Adam Banks, cake eater. Jersey. By the way, side story to that, Mario, this is actually kind of funny. So Sayer sent me this thing on Amazon. So if you guys actually want classic jerseys on Amazon, I guess there's like I wouldn't even say a dealer's deal, but there's like something going on at Amazon where you can get an Adam Banks jersey, Charlie Conway jersey for like $37 or something like that. Anyway, I got the jersey. We started calling each other Cake Eater. Or he started calling me Cake Eater. Then I posted on Instagram with Cake Eater, and obviously you didn't know about the backstory of that conversation. And then you started calling me Cake Eater. So it all kind of like worked and went hand in hand and everything. So it is kind of funny that
I get the reference, Cam. You eat cake, and you know what? It's admirable that you steer into that skid and that you accept it, right? That people understand that you're a cake eater, and that's okay. And you're like, you know what? I am a cake eater. I eat that cake. I just munch it down.
That's okay. And we all know that I am basically like an Adam Banks, which is basically, like the Rudy type character, like you described whenever we play pickup football, like I'm basically the Rudy who basically just, lays his heart out there, every time you play pickup football. So I respect it. That's right.
You're the high energy guy. Spark plug. Yeah. The lunch pail guy.
Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, first things first, before we dive into the training camp stuff and the Broncos, who wants to tell the story first? The guy who threw the ball or the guy who tried to attempt to catch the ball?
Why don't we each give our side of the story of what exactly happened, and we'll let the viewers decide the reality. So basically, what happened is, for the very first time in probably over 10 years of organizing pickup football games, we were playing with a Duke, like an actual football that they use in the NFL. Before then it had been, footballs that we brought from Target or Walmart. We're not trying to drop a bunch of money. And I finally decided, you know what? Let's just go for it. Let's get a Duke and just see how it goes and make it feel more like a real game. And if you're unfamiliar with the Duke, if you've never held one in your hands, they're really hard. Now, when you throw it and you catch it, it feels really good coming off your hand. It feels really good hitting your hands. But the problem is when it hits your hands, you have to catch it. Otherwise, it'll hit you square in the freaking face. And if that happens, it'll bloody you up like you just went 5 rounds with Mike Tyson. So what happened was Cameron got his hands on the ball, but didn't do the part where you actually catch the pass, and it went right through your hands, blasted you in the face, and that was where that unsightly picture came from. Was just, and you know what, Cam? Before then, you were having a good day. You had a handful of catches. You had some yak. I think you had a touchdown or two. Mm-hmm. And then, it was an issue of like hitting the ball in the sandlot to the beast. You got pummeled in the face, and now we can't play no more.
That's right. We literally canceled practice. Like, I think we actually canceled practice like right after that.
It wasn't practice. Talk about practice, man. It's a game, not practice. We're talking about games, man. Okay, we canceled the game because you couldn't breathe through your nose.
So, as much as people would want me to contradict this story, that is exactly what went down. I mean, we Basically the way it was is like, if you were to reenact it, it was like the scene in Little Giants minus the helmet part. So like, when Hot Hands, for anybody that hasn't seen Little Giants, shame on you. But basically when Hot Hands takes the football and hits him into the mask, it's stuck on the mask. Obviously,
It was like that, Cam, because he had a mask and he actually made the catch.
Right.
You didn't have a mask and didn't make the catch. It was more like that scene from the Brady Bunch where the girl gets hit in the face with the football in the nose.
Or
I think it was Jan. Was it Jan got hit? That was before my time, but I know that there is a Brady Bunch reference in there. You're like Jan or whatever, the person from the Brady Bunch. Just in this one instance, though, Cam.
That's right. Glenn asks, was I still able to serve the players water? As Mario said, we actually canceled it like right after the.
It wasn't, Glenn. It was a little bit traumatic. Because here's the thing, like Cam, you know this, and you can be a testament to this. Put a little heat behind my passes, right? And it's not always conducive to a lot of people. It was something that you had to get used to, Cam. You've gotten better over the years, but every once in a while, you'll have a gaff. And it's okay, because when the football is coming at you like 75, 80 miles an hour, it's a little tough to catch sometimes.
Yep. And I see Jordan in the chat, by the way. So yeah, so basically I was able to do what Jerry Jeudy could not, and become a little bit of a better catcher of the football as the years and years progressed.
Lord have mercy. Jerry Jeudy catching strays in the pot. Okay.
Anyway, let's get to some training camp. I know that you've been out there for some training camp days. It's we should probably phrase it, we shouldn't be coming to certain conclusions of like who will, be on the roster, like making the final 53-man roster. Cause that's, if we want to create rumors, that's one thing. But when you've been out there at camp, what has been your first initial takeaway, like overall with training camp?
Honestly, the first thing that I think that we need to discuss is how much better and how improved the defensive line is. And that was, I know the defense wasn't great last year, like especially at the beginning of the season, it was really bad. And then they started clicking kind of midway through the season when they went on that 5-game win streak. And you saw more of the Vance Joseph defense as opposed to like the marriage of a Vance Joseph, Vic Fangio defense. But the biggest weakness of that defense, far and away, was the interior defensive line. And I've said this on every single podcast that I've appeared on. I said it on Broncos Country tonight with Benjamin Albright and Nick Ferguson. As good as our edge rushers are, it doesn't matter, because there was no edge to set. When your interior defensive line is consistently being pushed back, is consistently being bullied, it doesn't matter how good your edge rushers are. Cooper, Browning, Benito this past year, you can't set an edge if there's no edge. They're completely getting washed out of the play. And now that you have a much better interior defensive line, it's like, I know Zach Allen was here last year. The amount of times that he's on the field pales in comparison to the amount of times that the edge rushers are on the field. You didn't have a good rotation of defensive line players that could consistently get a push on said line. And so I wanted to address that first. That is first and foremost the most important thing that I've noticed is the interior defensive line, bigger, stronger, more aggressive, and nastier. And that's where everything starts, is in the trenches. If you're getting good push on that defensive line, it kind of allows everything else to work in motion. It helps the edge rushers, it helps the middle linebackers, helps the corners, helps the safeties, help everything. So as long as your defensive line is looking improved and looking better the way that theirs are, then the defense as a whole is going to be improved.
What's interesting, and it confirmed what you're saying in terms of the defensive line and possibly even being deeper, as far as what they're talking about. Like, there was the one point where John Franklin Myers was not at practice, and obviously he was attending to family, and, our thoughts and prayers go out to JFM and his family. But when he was gone, the defensive line was still playing well. And I think that, like, to your point, guys like Zach Allen, who did play well in 2023, but he was like one of the lone bright spots of that defensive line, showed out last year. But when you factor in some of the added bodies that they brought in this year, Angelo Blackson, Malcolm Roach, like he wasn't there, but those types of players were still able to create a lot of havoc, create, a lot of, situations where they were able to get to the quarterback. I remember one practice, he was a 7-on-7, but like Blackson, I think it was Angelo Blackson, like blew up a play in 7-on-7. Typically you don't really see that much with 7-on-7. So I think that should give you a little bit of an idea possibly of like how deep specifically that rotational room is. And then granted, I mean, it's unfortunate we couldn't bring guys like Mike Purcell back, or even guys like Deshaun Williams, over the years. But I think it's really nice that they really have added to that room with guys like Malcolm Roach and Angelo Blackson.
The most important thing here, Cam, like as we're talking about the defensive line, you just want big guys. For lack of a better term, Cam, we need dudes that got cake. We need caked up defensive linemen. And you're the cake eater, and so you know all about what the defensive line is supposed to look like.
Yeah, we'll do a demonstration at some point about, maybe.
Please don't. I don't need a demonstration of that, Cameron. I don't think anybody does.
Sure, all right.
No, aside from the defensive line, one of the things that's been really interesting for me to watch throughout training camp, I mean, obviously the quarterback battle, everybody's talking that to death. I think it's a foregone conclusion that Bo Nix should start week 1. I don't know when that announcement will come. The only reason that he wouldn't is because maybe Sean Payton wants to protect him from, his season opener at Seattle. Like, that's a tough draw. Pittsburgh at home the following week is a tough draw. But that would be the only reason that he doesn't start week 1 is like, oh, let's wait for a cakewalk. There's another cake reference for you. As much of a cakewalk as you can for Bo Nix to start his professional career. Anyway, the room that I'm really interested in, and there are a lot of position battles, but the one that I'm most interested in and that I think is the most up in the air is the wide receiver room. Because I think a couple of the questions that need to be answered are, number one, how many receivers do you keep? Do you keep 5, 6, 7? Do you keep around like a Blake Watson as a running back who was a converted receiver in college? And does he play a little bit of both? We've seen with Sean Payton before that, Darren Sproles would be out wide. Alvin Kamara would be out wide. He's used different running backs as split out wide receivers, and not just to throw off the alignments, but to actually have them run routes. So that's what's really interesting to me, especially if you take into consideration, Cam. I don't know if you've been out there yet or, if you've kind of heard about this, but from what I've seen, the camps that I've been out to, Devon Vele looks a lot better right now than Troy Franklin. Now, granted, they're completely different receivers. Yeah. Vele is considerably older than Franklin. He's considerably bigger. It's his skill set translates to the NFL a little bit better. Franklin probably still needs to fill in a little bit. But from what I'm seeing, there's a reason that they took Vele in the 7th round. Apparently, they were incredibly high on him and were absolutely ecstatic that he was there in the 7th round. So even though it was kind of funny, Cam, that we joked about how they selected another Tim Patrick, same height, same weight, same college, almost the same 40, and now he's the same number that Tim used to be. It's like we're looking, we got in our DeLorean and went back a couple of years, and now we're seeing Tim Patrick from a few years ago. And I say only a few years ago because Devon Vele is only a couple of years younger than Tim Patrick, and that's probably why he's further along. But outside of that, Cam, let's run through this really quick, okay? And then I want to know what you think about the wide receivers. Courtland Sutton's a lock. Marvin Mims is a lock. Tim Patrick is a lock. Reynolds is a lock. And let's say Franklin is a lock because they traded up for a 4th-round pick. That's 5 right there. If you're keeping 6 guys, then that means that you're having to decide between Devon Vele, Brandon Johnson, Lil Jordan Humphrey. I know Michael Bandy has had a fantastic camp. So, I mean, you tell me, Cam, how would you prefer this wide receiver competition to be going? And who's on the roster, and then who's kind of your odd man out that maybe is a P squad option?
Yeah, I think it depends on. I think it depends on how it's going to shake out with the running back room, because I like how you phrased it. Because of how they use players in certain wide receiver sets and stuff like that. Because that is a That is a piece of the Sean Payton offense that I think, if you're looking forward to having that Sean Payton type of offense again, that's where you want to look for some of those guys like a Jaleel McLaughlin, a Blake Watson, possibly in some of those type of situations where, no, it wasn't necessarily, actual screenplays, but like when he was doing stuff with Alvin Kamara, it was almost like a screenplay, the way they were just basically designating plays for him. So will that shorten the amount maybe that you see with them wanting to have for wide receivers? I don't know. But for the 5 wide receivers, those 5 are locks. Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, Cortland Sutton, Josh Reynolds, and Tim Patrick. Like those are the 5. So then the question just becomes, do you do 6 or do you do 7? 7 feels very excessive, but I think that, I think it was Sean himself, was it like a week ago or a couple days ago, where he did mention he doesn't necessarily look at the numbers. When he looks at, building out a roster, it's technically about, make sure that, you want to build the best team, right? You want to build the best team. You want to build the best, unit that's there. So I wouldn't put it past him to go with 7. And I think that that's where guys like Brandon Johnson, specifically Devon Vele, are probably the 2 other names that I'm really kind of, looking toward, because, Virgil, I don't know what he has for practice squad availability yet. He's such a talented wide receiver, but given that room, I don't know if he's going to see any sort of separation and, move up the depth chart necessarily. So at some point, the Broncos may have to make that tough decision and cut their losses with a guy like Jalen Virgil, as rough it is for, fans in that underdog story. But Brandon Johnson's always been a guy who, just when you feel like he's been counted out, you know what I mean? Like just when you feel like he's been counted out, he emerges. I mean, like, the Russell Wilson situation was really bad, but like he was one of Russ's top targets the moment, even when Tim Patrick went down.
He was second on the team in touchdown catches last season. I think a lot of people don't understand that, and that was in very limited usage because he's behind guys like Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. He was pretty low on the pecking order, and despite that, and despite missing a handful of games, still second on the team in touchdown catches.
Yeah, so I think my hot take, at least initially, is that I think they keep 7. My question just, it falls back on, well, what is that running back room going to look like? And, and I don't know what it's going to look like, and that's where maybe that's another conversation, because between Javonte Williams, and we'll obviously talk about Greg Dulcich, but like Javonte Williams is arguably maybe the top news out of training camp, just simply based on how he's been able to perform, how he's able to, and this is a really good question too for you, just overall, like, is there something that players do different? Obviously, we're talking Javonte, but in Javonte's case, is there something that players do differently, from the side of things, like in terms of training camp, or things you're telling them specifically, like what they should do differently to help take care of their bodies, like Javonte specifically, as he's, getting better and moving well with that knee?
I think the biggest thing for Javonte, honestly, was just time. You have a really serious injury like that, and it was frankly a miracle that he was active for week 1. And I think what got lost in the sauce of everybody being so excited that Javonte returned for the preseason and subsequently week 1 was that he wasn't ready. And we saw that Javonte looked like a shell of himself, and that's to be expected. I think that he would have really benefited off of starting the year on the short-term IR. Kind of like Baron Browning did. Baron didn't start, I think, until week 7 or 8, something like that, and he was immediately impactful. And that's not something that you see a lot from a guy coming off of an injury, but it's because Baron gave himself adequate time to actually heal and then be productive. I think Javonte should have taken a page out of Baron Browning's book and sat out the first few games, made sure that you're able to recover more. And so we saw a Javonte that was a shell of himself. And so now this year, there's nothing really in specific that you need to do aside from you just needed more time. I know I had heard that he had dropped a bunch of weight. He does look trimmer, but it looks like he's carrying his weight better. And I had read that apparently one of the ways that he got himself to lose a bunch of this weight is he stopped eating Takis. which is hilarious because I had no idea that he was a middle school Hispanic student. But here we are. Yeah. Imagine how many bags of Takis you have to be eating to drop 20 pounds just from no longer eating them. Like, that's hysterical to me. So step one, don't eat Takis. I think that's a given. And then number two, and I preach this a lot, and if you haven't heard me say it, then you probably haven't heard any other of my shows, and that's okay. Maybe we'll get you in eventually. But the thing that people need to realize when they say that injuries like this, that they take 2 years to come back, there's a reason. It's not just because that's a time frame and you're like, oh, it takes 2 years to get back to normal because that's the time. No, the reason that it takes 2 years. So for Javonte Williams, for Baron Browning to an extent, for a lot of these guys, even for Tim Patrick, and we'll see how it goes this year, the reason that it takes 2 years, the first offseason, like with Javonte, like with Baron Browning, like with a lot of these guys, you're using that offseason to rehab. Okay. You're not training for the position that you are playing. So you go into that season not having trained, but having rehab. There is a massive difference between training and rehab. The subsequent offseason, assuming that you are still healthy, you are training as opposed to rehabbing. Now, what's going to be really interesting to see from Tim Patrick's perspective is right now, currently, because he got hurt in training camp the last 2 years, but, more recently last year, he had recovered by the end of the season. In fact, there were rumors floating around that had the Broncos made the playoffs during that little playoff push, there was a way to get Tim Patrick on the active roster. It would have involved some finagling, but basically they were going to release Tim Patrick. Had they made the playoffs, keep in mind, if the Broncos had made the playoffs, remember they went on that little run, it was a possibility at one point, believe it or not, they would have released him, signed him back, and basically bypassed all of the bureaucracy, and Tim would have been eligible to play in the first preseason game. So the reason I tell you that story is because Tim had rehabbed during the season. So this subsequent offseason, this past offseason, Tim has been able to train, a la Javonte Williams, a la Baron Browning. In fact, I've talked to Baron a lot about it, and he tells me how excited he is that he can actually train, that he's been training as opposed to having to rehab. Because when you rehab, you're trying to get your body back to 100%. When you're training, your body is 100% and you're continuing to improve and hone your craft. So circling back to what you were talking about, Cam, and what you're asking about, that's the most important thing for a football player coming off an injury. Sticking with your routine, making sure that the rehab process goes smoothly, but most importantly, you just need to give it time. And I know it's difficult, especially in the running back position, because the average lifespan of an NFL player is 3 years. And I totally understand wanting to rush back, but sometimes these guys struggle seeing the big picture. And it's like, are you willing to miss 6 games in order to extend your career 16 games?
Yep. And I think that, and we've kind of been beating a dead horse, the last couple shows here on Manely, but I think that what you're talking about, Mario, is, I think something that we've been talking about like the last couple of shows, and that is, I think, another layer to the whole Javonte thing. One thing that he's not having to do now here at training camp is have that brace on your knee. And one thing that I think, anybody who has played sports before, having a brace on your knee, the mental game you play of having a brace on your knee also significantly plays a role, possibly with maybe how you're limited or what you can and cannot do. So having that freedom now of not having that, brace on your knee is like one of the freest feelings in the world, knowing the fact that, man, I'm free. I can get a chance to, do what I need to do. And so now that he is healthy, he can be able to run wild, basically. And it's almost like that scene in Forrest Gump where he's running and he literally breaks his brace as he's running. I mean, it's to a degree, it's like, it's basically that kind of, thing with Javonte right now.
That's what they need to do with Javonte. First preseason game in Indy next week, very first carry. They need to like pitch it outside, really overload that side, get him a seam, get him going. And they need to construct a brace for Javonte where he literally runs out of it like in Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Just so he has that mental capacity to be like, okay, the brace is off, I ran through it, and I'm all good. I think that's what players should do. and maybe that'll be my next business venture, that I develop a knee brace that kind of dissipates easily, that you run out of, just for the mental, the idea of mentally conquering that injury.
Yeah.
This is brilliant.
Yeah. Going forward with some of that running back room, we touched briefly, at least with the passing game, guys like McLaughlin, Blake Watson. There's another guy in the room who might be the biggest roster bubble as far as, the entire roster himself, and that would be Samaje Perine. And the way we should preface this is, it's not the fact that Perine is bad or anything. It's just about how deep the the room necessarily is. And I think that, I think there's another layer to probably why Perine might be off the roster, and that is this new kickoff rule. I think that, one of the things that I've been able to see with the kickoffs when I've been out there at camp is Beatty's been out there on kickoffs, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, McLaughlin's been able to do some kickoffs. So who knows if Watson's been able to do some of that and whatnot. But I think that that's at least another angle to probably why they do carry 4, and guys like a McLaughlin or a Watson are a little bit more, should I say, valuable with that new kickoff rule.
I discussed this a little bit on altitude adjustment a couple days ago. Yeah, you're right. It's not that Perine isn't an excellent running back. In fact, I don't think that his usage was nearly enough last year. I think he was far and away the best running back in that stable. Like we already discussed, he had a shell of Javonte Williams. He had a rookie undrafted running back in Jaleel McLaughlin. Perine, I mean, every 2-minute drill, it was the Samaje Perine show. Every time that they needed to hurry down the field, it was dink and dunk, and Samaje Perine became Russell Wilson's best friend. And so, yeah, I think it's a foregone conclusion that Perine is going to get released. I think there's a very, very good chance that we see a lot of Samaje Perine next week in Indianapolis, just to kind of showcase him. I'm sure that the Broncos will try to trade him. Maybe they reach out to Dallas. Maybe they reach out to Cincinnati. Samaje can have a little reunion up there. Mm-hmm. And I think it's mutually beneficial. I think Samaje doesn't have a definitive role here in this offense, and they probably want to go younger. If you assume that, the trio of Estime, Williams, and McLaughlin, that you can kind of overcome losing a guy like Perine. Call up Dallas. I think Samaje Perine would be running back 1 immediately in Dallas. I think he could make a case for being running back 1 immediately in Cincinnati, a place that he's very familiar with. And so I think they're really going to showcase Samaje, and I think that they're going to run the wheels off of him in this first preseason game. They're going to make some calls, and maybe a team trades for him, but more than likely they're just going to wait until he gets released. And like I said, I think it'll be best for both parties. I think Samaje can really thrive in a different system, in a different situation. And I think the Broncos will be better off in the long run. They get his contract off the books, which is the most that they're paying any running back by far on the roster right now. And that's how I see that going.
I'm with you. I think the likely result is either Samaje Perine gets released or is traded. Actually, I think it's fair to say it's definitely the release. I will say, though, granted, it was more of the Trinity Benson, the Albert Okwuegbunam type situation, so a little bit different in that regard. But when they were showcased, the George Payton, for as much crap as he has gotten at times with Broncos country and Broncos Twitter, he's been able to kind of, work his way and at least get some draft capital.
He's finessed some picks for, players that never became anything. Really quick, Cam, I wanted to address this because I see it in the chat here. Scorpio says, guys, having a debate with a good friend, which happens to be a Jets fan. LOL. Yeah, LOL for sure. That garbage ass franchise. How many INTs did Knicks throw over the start of training camp overall in that time? I don't have a specific number. If I'm going back, Scorpio, I'm pretty sure he's thrown 3 total. And I do know that at least one of them, no, actually, I think it was 2 of them for sure. The wide receiver fell. I was at camp yesterday, and I know Cortland Sutton, there was a lot of slipping in the field, like in the area where we were. Cortland Sutton had slipped, and the ball kind of went right to Jonas Griffith. But yeah, I think, Scorpio, that it's 3 total. But I also want to say, I'm not worried about interceptions. I remember when Case Keenum was here, and the big thing was like, oh, Case Keenum never threw an interception in camp. He never threw an interception in camp. It's incredible. And I remember hearing about Patrick Mahomes, his rookie year, his second year, and even to his third year, how many interceptions that he threw in camp. And so, tell your Jets friend that, he doesn't know ball because A, he's a fan of a poverty franchise, and B, nobody gives a shit about interceptions in training camp.
Yeah.
You tell him I said that, Scorpio. And if he has a problem, DM me at Vetanze Therapy on Twitter.
Not at Mile High Mario, by the way.
Shut up, Cameron.
Cake
eater.
By the way,
cake, Cameron. Hold on. You keep talking. I'm listening. I have to plug my laptop in.
But and by that same token, as you're talking about interceptions, I feel like it's almost like, as we're talking about, it feels like the people who throw the less interceptions are probably the people that you feel a little bit worried about, right? And I think that there's some rumors certainly, going around, with JJ McCarthy and the Vikings right now, like, whether it's a troll from, some Vikings fans and whatnot, but it seems like JJ's like throwing like less picks or something like that at camp or whatever.
Okay.
So
let's address this, okay, shall we? Because I have never had a problem with the Minnesota Vikings. I have never had a problem with Minnesota Vikings fans. My cousin was a coach for the Vikings for several years. He's now on a different team, and that's fine. Where are you as a Vikings fan getting this level of audacity to come out of franchise like the Denver Broncos? Yeah, we've been down bad for the last decade. We know we've been there. Y'all have been down bad for the entirety of your existence, okay? You had one opportunity to make it to a Pro Bowl when you had arguably one of the greatest teams of all time. You blew in the NFC Championship game because your kicker can't kick. Now we fast forward to right now, and Minnesota Vikings fans, again, I don't have a problem with you. I don't have a problem with your team. I like your team. I like Justin Jefferson. I like J.J. McCarthy. But J.J. McCarthy has not run with the first team at all. It's been all Sam Darnold. And you want to yap your mouth about how good J.J. McCarthy is because he's burning dudes that'll be bagging groceries in a couple weeks? Give me a freaking break. It is not a comparison right now. And again, I'm sorry. I don't want to be upset, and I don't want to be this guy. I don't have a beef with you. But I've had so many stupid-ass Vikings fans in my mentions talking about how much better J.J. McCarthy looks. It's like, yeah, guess what, bud? If Bo Nix was running against a third-team offense from pillar to post, he'd probably look pretty good too. Hell, a lot of you people here watching, if you're running with the third team consistently, you're probably completing some passes. That's just how training camp works. Let me calm myself down. What it is, Cameron, they all got really upset. They got really mad because Sean Payton finessed them out of some draft picks. He convinced them that they needed to trade up for J.J. McCarthy. One spot, by the way. And Sean Payton never had any intention of taking J.J. McCarthy. They are still mad about that. And let me be crystal clear when I say this. If your team has never won a Super Bowl in the entirety of its existence, you don't get to talk shit about anything ever. Shut your mouth.
They actually had a chance to win a Super Bowl the year when the Broncos won, right? Because they played the Falcons and the
That's what I was talking about. When they were 15-1, they had arguably the greatest team of all time. Yep. They missed a kick against the Atlanta Falcons. And honestly, by the grace of God, the Broncos were kind of handed a second straight Super Bowl. I was terrified of playing the Vikings because, at that age, I didn't know their checkered past and that they had absolutely no chance to win a championship because they had never done it before and haven't done it since. But yeah, that was their best opportunity, Cameron. And I, a part of me really wishes that they had played the Broncos. The Broncos still would have beat them. It just would have been a more entertaining Super Bowl because then at least we would have like that one thing over them. Like, hey, y'all had a chance. The one Super Bowl that you were in, or I don't know their history. Maybe they were in others. Didn't win any, so it doesn't really matter. And you blew it. But we can't even use that because they weren't even good enough to make it. They choked.
And oh, by the way,
They
if
choked on the cake, Cameron. They were eating the cake, and they choked on it. You hate to see it.
and they're enjoying the cake a little bit too much too. But I think as far as with JJ and the and him running with their team, the other part of that too is there's a certain quarterback they signed for like 1 year who seems to be keeping JJ McCarthy on that third team right now. So I mean, something maybe I would want to file away if I was a Vikings fan. Like that Sam Darnold for right now is keeping JJ McCarthy on the bench right now. So.
And he might be good. I said, I like J.J. McCarthy. The way that the board was dropping, I thought that the Broncos 100% were trading up for J.J. McCarthy. I still am a big J.J. McCarthy fan. I'm a fan of the kid. And then maybe someday he will be a good starting quarterback. But it's like, you can't talk theoretical shit, okay? You can't talk shit about theoretical things that have not happened, all right? As it stands right now, it was even announced that Sam Darnold is going to be the week 1 starter. That's not a big deal, okay? But let's pump the brakes on anointing J.J. McCarthy, something that he's not, because he's not ready yet. And again, that's okay. But Viking fans need to stop acting like he's done something because he hasn't. Oh, Glenn, thanks for Googling, Glenn. Vikings are 0-4 in the Super Bowl. Pathetic. That's worse than never going to one. Ask the Bills. You go to 4 straight and you don't win. They're 0-4 in the Super Bowls. Pathetic. No room to talk. No room to talk shit. In fact, you probably got to win 2 or 3 before you can start talking shit as a Vikings fan.
Yeah, and I think that for, going back to, I was going to say just with Sean Payton, he finessed everybody. Like, he even finessed Bronco fans thinking that they're going to get J.J. McCarthy, and it all thought was going to end up being, that way, and obviously it didn't work out, and, it actually ended up being the guy, truly like Bo Nix all along kind of deal. But moving forward with, let's go with the tight end room. This is one where we could see some changes, right? Some changes in the room, or it stays completely the same. But one of the players certainly, and we mentioned Javante's is maybe 1A and 1B probably as far as like some of the big takeaways just overall with training camp. Maybe the number one right now is Greg Dulcich is healthy. And
Lucas Kroll, absolutely, Cameron, because he's the best player on the team, as was established by Cecil Lammey, who thinks he knows a lot of stuff and doesn't. But golly, does he really want to be liked by people who are more important than him? No, you're right. It is Greg Dulcich. Apologize for cutting you off, but I had to fit that in there.
But no, it's really important because you do look like Lucas Kroll. So, I mean, if you do have
You are adorable.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you some cake to eat for that.
That's right. But I mean, Dulcich, like it, I think there's a point to always be made. It's never sometimes the talent when it comes to, certain players. With Dulcich, it was pretty evident. It wasn't really, talent for him. It was truly like, he's got to stay on the field. Even,
That's it. Mm-hmm.
Even Browning even said it, and I respected his goal for the year. It wasn't sack totals. It wasn't, performance based in terms of goal, which maybe that's something he has, off the mic, for sure in terms of performance goal, but playing 17 games, right? And I think that should be the goal for anybody that has missed some significant time. So for Greg Dulcich, your goal, play 17 games, man. And I think right now, just the fact that he's healthy and he looks good, it's all gas, no brakes. I mean, it's a beautiful sight to see. Of course, he's got that, beautiful locks of, hair. Of course, the D'Artagnan hair, the what is it? The Inigo
Weird Al Yankovic hair. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, man. And it's the same thing with Caden Stearns, right? It's like, for a fact that when they are on the field and they are healthy, they're unbelievable football players. And that's the big catch-all, right? That's the caveat. They just have to stay on the field. The best ability is availability, okay? And as long as this team can stay healthy, and it struggled in the past, even though it was better last year, it was still a little bit brutal, okay? And I mean, yeah, that's all you can say about it. As long as Greg Dulcich stays on the field, he's far and away tight end one. I mean, Adam Troutman he's a role player. He's a very specific tight end that you need. He's an excellent blocker. He's very smart. He's okay for like short down and distance situations, but he's not Greg Dulcich. You know, Lucas Kroll, the best player on the team, far and away, arguably the best player in the entire league. He's still not Greg Dulcich. They have two different skill sets. Greg Dulcich is a better athlete. He's a better athlete than some of the wide receivers. But again, if you are on the sideline, it doesn't matter what your potential is. It doesn't matter how good you are. You need to be able to play.
You know, so as far as that tight end, and something that Sean mentioned, was it a couple days ago, was about the blocking. Does the blocking worry you, or is it simply just about, you know, getting him in the best possible situations for himself to succeed, you know, as a pass catching tight end, something that Sean knows very, very well, with
Not
Jimmy.
yeah. I'm not terribly worried about the blocking. You know, I think as long as you are a willing blocker, like as long as Greg Dulcich is getting physical and he's getting his hands dirty, and you know, it's an effort thing, right? You have to want to block. I mean, no one will ever confuse Travis Kelce for a fantastic blocker, but he's a fantastic pass catcher, and he does enough. You know, it's like George Kittle is a much better pass blocker. There's not a lot of George Kittles. That's what makes him so rare, like a Mark Andrews. They are plus blockers, and they are plus pass catchers. There's very few guys that can do that, especially in today's NFL. So that's why it's important to have both. So as long as when Greg Dulcich's hand is in the ground, he's actually throwing himself around and putting some effort into it, I think that's what I need to see more. Because from a matchup standpoint, he's a mismatch nightmare. Okay, linebackers and safeties won't be able to cover Greg Dulcich as long as he is healthy. And then real quick, Cam, I see. Yeah, I feel like I've been ignored Glenn this entire time, and usually when he comments on my show, I give him a lot of crap. Yeah. Do you think new PS2 contract happens before the season? The shit bum Tyreek Hill just got a new deal. I know it's amazing that Tyreek Hill can beat up all the women and children that he wants, and they just keep giving him money. It's a funny thing. I don't think it's going to be done this year, Glenn, just because they still need more of this Russell Wilson contract off of the books, and they have an additional year to figure it out, you know, having picked up his 5th-year option. So it will get done. And I think a big part of that, of it getting done, is the Quinn Minor situation getting done. Okay. Yeah. It's one less thing that you need to worry about. Quinn is locked in. Now it's kind of like going forward. How do you address Baron Browning? How do you address Jonathan Cooper? I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, Pat Surtain doesn't get re-signed for about a year and a half. And honestly, when that time comes, he will more than likely reset the market. Like whenever they decide to re-sign and extend Patrick Surtain, he will be the highest paid cornerback in the NFL, and he will reset the market. I don't know what the numbers will look like. Right. All I know is they'll look at whoever's the highest paid, which I think is Jair Alexander, and they'll ask for more. They'll ask for more overall. They'll ask for more APY, and they'll ask for more guaranteed.
And who knows if, you know, I mean, Sauce was a year
after. Glenn, you're ugly. Sorry, Sauce Cam, I had to throw that in there. Glenn's ugly as hell. He's nice, though. Well, actually, he's not even nice. He's kind of a dick.
I was going to say,
he's funny. Glenn's funny. He's funny. He's funny looking, and he's kind of a dick.
I was gonna say the bald head, you know, it's something about being, you know, bald. You're the exception though. It's okay.
Yeah, so are you, Cameron. You know, and like for the amount of cake that you eat, okay, Glenn eats salads, okay? He tosses the salad and then he eats it. So he's not like you. We're different.
Yeah. So as far as, we might as well just get into some of the defense, and, you know, maybe we'll actually, no, let's finish up with the offensive line, because you talked about the Quinn Minor situation. We'll get into the defense here. The trenches. I think that, you know, obviously the injury to Quinn Bailey, the way we should probably preface this, it's a major loss of depth, but in terms of the overall starting unit, the overall starters, it doesn't necessarily change where things are currently at right now. but it's a major loss for depth. How confident are you with that offensive line moving forward with this year? Because one of the things that, over the course of those 8 years, one of the biggest things with the Broncos offensive line has been nothing but consistency with that offensive line. And, Garrett Bowles is one of the most longest tenured Broncos, if not the longest tenured Bronco now. And I think that, he's entering a contract year. It's possible the Broncos maybe could try and lock him down or go younger in the draft and finally address the tackle that they've been maybe needing to the last handful of years in drafting one. That's never been in the cards.
It's Cameron, it's so disturbing to me that they have not drafted a left or right tackle for that matter with a day 1 or day 2 pick since Garrett Bowles in 2017. It's like, that's not how you build a roster. It's not how you build an offensive line. And then what happens, Cameron? You find yourself in a situation like right now where everyone except your center is on, not just a big contract, but a really, really, really fat contract. Like, if I'm not mistaken, I think of the top 6 contracts on the Broncos roster right now, 4 of them are on that offensive line. And so, you're asking me how much faith that I have. You better have a lot of freaking faith, because you got a shit ton of money invested in that offensive line. Now, what's funny is I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're like the 14th highest paid offensive line. And that's only because 4 of the contracts are massive. And then the one center contract, regardless of who wins between Wattenberg and Forsythe, and it's a late round contract, so that really brings the average down. It's like Forsythe is basically who I was in college. Okay, the entire class would all get A minus, B plus, and the median was looking good. The mean was looking good. And then here was my ass with a C minus and D plus, and brought the average down for the whole group. So it's like everybody around me, it's like, when I'm in group projects, like, we should be getting an A, but because of me, we got more of like a C minus. That's kind of how the offensive line is. It's like left tackle, left guard, right tackle. They're all getting A's in terms of their salaries, and then the center's rocking like a D minus, and so they're right middle in the road in terms of how much they're getting paid.
Funny story. Sayer has actually seen my place first, and you've actually never even seen my place. So when Sayer's in town, that might actually end up being the first time you might actually see my place.
Sayer, you better get ready to do bicep curls until your arm is stuck in a 90-degree angle. I don't want you to be able to extend your arm past this after I'm done with you.
With the offensive line, you touched on Wattenberg, you touched on Forsythe. We should at least let some of the people know that, because that's been some of the conversation with training camp, and that is Luke Wattenberg for the most part. Luke Wattenberg for the most part has been the starter, and at least the first team for the first team, starter with that's been given reps. Forsythe has at least given some chances, but obviously it's been nothing but Wattenberg. And I think if you're going to differentiate between Wattenberg and Forsythe, I think it's easy to think Forsythe, given the connection with Bo, Bo's first his first year there at Oregon. But Wattenberg is interesting because they traded up for him, and granted, that was a George Payton draft pick, and so we should at least preface it that way, that they traded up for him, and he's also a guard / center.
Yeah, I think time will tell. And I will say, I've only been out there a couple times, but the times that I've been out there and I paid attention to it, the offensive line looks better with Alex Forsythe. I think now that's really nothing against Wattenberg. I think Wattenberg will make the team. I think he's a really nice depth piece to have, especially after losing Quinn Bailey. Not that they played the same position, but just in terms of depth on your offensive line. Forsythe has just been better. The running game looks better. The pocket on live period looks better when Forsythe is out there. And again, I'm just basing this off of the days that I have been to practice and seen. But I'm also basing it off of what I've heard from someone like Zach Seegers from LTB, who always live tweets the practices that he's at. When I've talked to, Ryan Edwards, who knows way more than Benjamin Albright, and everybody should only listen to Ryan Edwards when it comes to camp talk and not Benjamin Albright, because, there's a difference in the two of them. And Ryan Edwards loves himself some Alex Forsyth. And so this has been the general consensus in terms of like, from my own perspective, and then things that I've heard from people who have been at camp, that to the point where I would be very, very surprised if Forsyth isn't the starting center this year. And Graham says, need one of them to be our starter at center for the next 12 years. Wouldn't that be nice, Graham? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to draft anybody that's a starter for 12 years with the same team? That would be miraculous. But a 7th round safety or center, yeah, that would be glorious. I would definitely need some of that.
I feel like, what is it, the most longest tenured center, at least that I can recall of recent, was Matt Paradis, probably, right? I think that
I honestly could not tell you. I mean, I know Paradis was there for a while. It's one of those things that you don't want to pay a lot of attention to. Right. And like a good offensive line is kind of like a spare tire. Okay. You need to have it, but you don't want to think about it. Okay. You don't want to be put in a position where you're thinking about it. Okay. It's just something that needs to do its job and be with you at all times. But as soon as you don't have one, that's when it's a problem. And I feel like in the past, the lines were good enough to where you don't really think about it. And, a lot of that was an ode to Peyton Manning, because he improved the play of every single offensive lineman. And since then, it's been a bit of a revolving door at every single position.
Moving forward to the strength of the team, and that would be the defense. What do you feel like we touched on the defensive line there briefly. We don't need to touch on that anymore. But as far as the back end, the linebackers, the secondary, what do you feel like is their biggest strength between the two of them?
It's hard to say, because there's a lot of unknown in this situation. Like, I love PJ Locke's game. But we don't know that much about him, right? It's like he's a guy that's consistently gotten better every single year. Started as like P squad, special teamer level player, and he's just gotten better and better and better to the point where the Broncos felt really good about paying him in this offseason, and he absolutely deserved it. But we don't know like what we're getting from him as a full-time starter. Like, I'm a huge PJ Locke fan. I'm a huge PJ Locke believer, but we still need to see a little bit more. We need to see it translate out onto the field. Jaquan McMillan and Patrick Surtain, I think, are probably the best aspect of this defense, and like the guys that you need to worry about the least. But with that being said, the cornerback 2 position opposite of Patrick Surtain, probably going to be Levi Wallace. But what does that tell us about Damari Mathis? What does that tell us about Riley Moss? I think both of them have had a few moments in training camp, but it sounds like there's been more bad than good from both of those guys. So that worries me a little bit. But I think the guy that not nearly enough people are talking about right now, Cameron, Jonas Griffith, who, if we're talking about road to recovery, like I had discussed earlier, this offseason, Jonas Griffith was training. He was not rehabbing. He had hurt himself during training camp, kind of the same as Tim Patrick this past year. And so all during the season, Jonas Griffith was rehabbing. During the offseason, he was able to train. And I will say this, and I've talked to multiple guys on the defense, and they all kind of agree that Jonas Griffith is by far the most athletic linebacker. And so, yeah, it was tough to lose Josie Jewell. It was nice, he and Singleton had a nice combo, like they were a nice duo. But in today's NFL, you have to have a really fast, athletic middle linebacker. And Josie Jewell was not that guy. Alex Singleton isn't really that guy. And so I think Jonas Griffith is going to be imperative. Now, can he pick up where he left off, from the 2022 season, a la Javonte Williams? That remains to be seen. But I think he's the biggest factor that not enough people are talking about. And I'm also really interested to see how Cody Barton fits in. Barton's made a lot of he's a tackling machine, okay? He's more athletic than he looks. But he doesn't necessarily pop on tape the way that an Alex Singleton will, but he's a very solid linebacker who's not going to make a lot of mistakes. So I'm really interested to see how they kind of get those 3 guys on the field. And then, as Graham is saying, I'm a big Stearns fan. It doesn't stay healthy. Yeah, I think I think that's going to be maybe the biggest X factor for me because, like we said earlier, if Caden Stearns is on the field, he's your best safety. And I don't think it's remotely close, honestly. We have seen in spurts how unbelievably good Caden Stearns is. In fact, Justin Simmons told me when Stearns was a rookie that he was unbelievable. Like, Justin could not stop singing his praises. He said, this is about as close to a safety like me that I have ever seen. And so I have been completely sold on Caden Stearns since day one. It was absolutely devastating, the injury that he suffered week 1 last year. And all we can do is hope and we can pray that he remains healthy. Jack, really quick, best center ever, Jim Otto, number 00, gold jacket. I don't know anything about that, Jack, but the fact that he was number 00, yeah, dude, you got my vote. That's fantastic. Mundungus is in the house and said, I heard cake and salad, and I came running. First of all, Mundungus, I've never seen you run in my entire life. You don't run, you scoot. And I am shocked and appalled that you would run for salad. You got it backwards, my boy.
Oh, well, and I at least appreciate that he led off with, I heard cake first. Like, I at least appreciate that he led off with, that part of it first. And then he went with
I think it's pretty obvious that Mundungus is a cake eater, okay?
Yeah.
That dude devours cake.
And Mountain Dew.
He said, I shuffle, my man. Glenn is the salad tosser or salad eater.
We're going to need a truffle shuffle on air, Mundungus, on 5280. So as far as moving forward, as a whole, looking at this team, is this team, because I've always felt like the ceiling is 10-7, the floor is 7-10, which is basically like right where they basically have been, even with Russ there. So I think that 10 puts you right within that territory, depending on if everything shakes out, that they're fringe playoff team. And 7-10 kind of puts you back to where things were maybe just slightly worse. But I think that for where things shake out, Mario, where do you have them? Is it 7-10? Is it 10-7? Is it the worst case scenario, which is completely 3-14 or whatever? Like, are you one of those people?
This is what I'm having a really hard time. So I'm going to be honest with you. And granted, this was before the draft, but every single year I drink the orange Kool-Aid. I eat the orange and blue cake. Okay. I'm a cake eater too. I'll just admit it. It's out there now. It's not coming back. Yeah, exactly. Right. Everybody should eat cake at least once and see how you like it. Now, anyway, I every year I talk myself into why this team will be a playoff team. And a couple months ago, again, before the draft, I felt like I was in purgatory. Okay. I'm like, I want us to be good. I want us to be a playoff team, but I don't want to have 7, 8, even 9 wins again. Like, I don't want to stay in purgatory. I would prefer them to just be bad and have a top draft pick and finally start building this team from the ground up. And then the draft happened, and my knee-jerk reaction to Bo Nix is that I wasn't excited. And then I heard Sean Payton talk about him, and now I've heard Bo Nix speak himself, and I've seen him out at training camp, and all of a sudden my faith in Broncos is renewed. And all of a sudden I find myself talking myself into why they could be a 10-win team. Yeah. In fact, if you don't like Adam Rank and you're a Broncos fan, then you're just not doing it right, okay? Yeah. Adam Rank, and I view literally orange and blue colored glasses. I don't know if you can tell with the light. I see life through orange and blue colored glasses, okay? And Adam Rank is still more positive than me because Adam Rank thinks that the Broncos are going to win 10 games. I just do not have that level of confidence right now. It gun to my head, if you had to ask me how many games this team wins, I feel like it's an 8-win season. Yeah. But I don't want fans to get hung up on that, okay? I want people to focus on the fact that, is Bo Nix improving? Is Bo Nix getting better? They're gonna win some games that they shouldn't, and they're also gonna lose some games that they shouldn't. This is where I see this team. As a Broncos fan, What I want to see and what you should want to see is Bo Nix progressing? Is he looking more and more comfortable as the year goes on? Does he have control of the offense? Is he picking up protections? Is he checking at the line? Is he reading the defense correctly? That is what we as Bronco fans need to see. Otherwise, it's back to purgatory.
That's right.
And then real quick before we wrap, I'm trying to get this caught up. Oh no, I just lost it. Hold on, Cameron. I gotta find. Oh no, it's gone. Oh no. I
Is
was
it
looking at what Jack Kenna was saying, and he is it. No, it was before that, but I can't scroll up. If you're the GM, who do you want to start at quarterback? Jack, it's got to be Bo Nix. He's looked like the best quarterback, and this is not me drinking the orange Kool-Aid. This is like what I am seeing. He's the best quarterback. Jarrett Stidham is the most steady. He's probably the most reliable right now. But I think as it stands, and like I'm a big proponent of having quarterbacks sit. A lot of the top quarterbacks in the NFL right now, they were not week one starters. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy. The list goes on and on. I think, Justin Herbert was one game, but let's not get bogged down in semantics. I'm fine with your franchise quarterback not starting right away. Granted, given the situation doesn't lend itself for the rookie quarterback. Okay. As I see it, he is the easy and obvious choice. And like I said earlier, the only reason that you wouldn't be having Bo Nix start immediately is if you don't want to, throw him in his first game at Seattle on the road week one. But that kind of stuff shouldn't deter him because he's going to have to play the best teams eventually. Right. So if it's me, I'm rocking with Bo Nix.
And I think the reason why we have the record conversations, well, one, we have to. I mean, we have to talk about it. But I think that the best answer is to what you're talking about, in the sense of the more you see a team progress and get better, specifically under Bo Nix, is the best way to look at this. And I think that especially given the fact that this is a young football team, it's a young football team. And especially if you go check out Diana Rossini's podcast with Chase Daniel, they talked about how the young players are buying in, to the Sean Payton system. So if you're seeing that and you're seeing it grow, over the course of a season, that's really the biggest victory in and of the season, not necessarily the record prediction or anything else. So Mario, it has absolutely been a blast.
Real quick, one last thing, and I wanted to answer this for Graham. Graham, you're the best. Thank you so much for watching. He wants to know what team I would be able to start on today. I love this. If you're wondering where this is coming from, you can go check out my Twitter at Vetanze Therapy. My pinned tweet. After Russell Wilson had put out, one of his typical workout montages, and Steeler fans were getting all excited, like, oh, look at Russ working. He's doing this. He's doing that. Blah, blah, blah. And I went out and I did exactly the same thing, even used the same soundtrack as Russ. And not to toot my own horn, but just to be like, everything that this dude does is very pedestrian. So anyway, I wanted to preface that by saying, if you want to see my ability as a quarterback, it is my pinned tweet on Twitter at Vetanze Therapy. But in terms of what team I could probably actively start for right now, best chance, Jack, you're going to hate me, man. And again, I appreciate you listening, but it's the Raiders. The only problem is I would never play for the Raiders because I hate the Raiders. I like you though, Jack. We're cool.
Well, I was going to say,
fuck the Raiders.
I think that, for the, I think there's a misconception going around that, you're QB1, which you are QB1. But I think that, when you aren't all-time QB, you do get a chance to show your talents a little bit at wide receiver. And given the fact that there's a certain other team in division who doesn't really have a wide receiver, you could fit right in it, and basically replacing Quentin Johnson right away.
It's exhausting. It's exhausting being the best quarterback and the best wide receiver when we play pickup football. But you know what, Cameron? That's my cross to bear, and that's my burden, and I'm okay with it.
Thank you again, buddy. Make sure you follow the work that he does over there at the Let's Talk Broncos podcast, which he also has another podcast that's over there called Altitude.
It's called Altitude Adjustment. Okay, I didn't know if you were getting there. It's not the Let's Talk Broncos podcast. Okay, It's Altitude Adjustment. We call it AA for short. So if you're a big fan of AA, if you need a little bit of AA, maybe, then my podcast, that's for you.
This AA
might cake, everybody.
Say this AA might be better than the actual AA meetings. But he also has a swag shop, of course. Mario, why don't you go ahead and drop where people can buy some swag from you over there at that boutique shop. If you haven't bought it,
heck yeah. The link, the link is in my Twitter. Again, there's a whole lot of fun stuff on my Twitter because I refuse to call it X. But you can go to altitudeadjustmentshop.com. There's a lot of kind of fun homemade looking shirts. There's a few Bo Nick shirts that say, Big Nick's energy and I believe. Just a lot of really fun, hilarious things like that. The Altitude Adjustment logo that Patrick and I have for my show, if you wanted to rep us, that's fantastic. For Vetanze Therapy, my actual business, like the thing that I do for a living, got some swag on there. It's just go check it out, share the link. Again, it's altitudeadjustmentshop.com.
And obviously, more importantly, please go see him. If you guys are in the Colorado area, please go see Mario. He is the best person to ever, have him work on you. He's an absolute blast. My family can attest to it. I obviously can attest to it. The dude is a miracle worker. He actually, if he was a Marvel superhero, he actually would be a superhero, literally. But he would be like the Chris Pratt, by the way. For anybody that feels like he's, some other character, he literally looks like Chris Pratt. So just want to just throw that out there. Anyway, for Mario, myself, this has been another episode of the Manely Broncos podcast. Make sure you stay tuned for another episode next Wednesday as we do another training camp update for you right here in the Manely Broncos podcast. And, of course, the 5280 podcast on Tuesday.
Fast lane when I pass in the street. Bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down because the coast's racking up the flame out.